welcome back to Nani Knits and Reads. My name is Natalie, and this is where I talk a little bit about what I'm knitting and what I've been reading. And I just wanted to say before I get into everything that I am just blown away by the support that I got from the first video that I made, and I really had no idea that it would get that type of engagement and feedback, and it was all very positive. I'm just so grateful for this community, and I just am so excited to keep making more. And now I feel a little bit more brave and able to keep pursuing this little dream of mine of designing my own knitwear pieces. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I made this new video a little bit sooner than I had planned, and if you want to check out the last one where I talk a little bit about myself and where I'm from and my family, you can check that out, and please like and subscribe so that you can not miss out on any future knitting or reading content. What I'm going to talk to you about today is a little holiday called Summerween. And this is an unofficial holiday. It's usually celebrated around late July. And I looked up where it originally came from, and it's from a show called Gravity Falls on the Disney Channel. I've never watched that show, but there's an episode called Summerween apparently, and that's where they celebrate Halloween in October, and then they also do once in the summertime. And I think the vibe behind it is just to try to capture the spirit of Halloween in the summer and have a little bit of fun with it. And I thought, that's a perfect opportunity to be creative. I love holidays and I love the spooky season. And I just thought I would come up with a few things to knit and some stories I could read and share both of those with you. So that's what I did. I did just a few smaller knit objects because I didn't have a lot of time, and I wanted to try to pick out a few that I thought you might be interested in. And they're not big garments really, they're just kind of like accessories and things like that. And I read a couple stories that have a little bit of spookiness to them, so I'm going to share that with you as well. So for the knitting objects, that I'm going to talk about those first. I have a couple finished pieces to show you. And the first one I'm going to show you is this pair of socks. The pattern is called the Spooky Sock Set. So it's called the Spooky Sock Set by Stone Knits, and I did look at their page on Ravelry. That's where I found this pattern, and they have a bunch of other really cute sock patterns that involve fun colorwork designs. I saw one with chickens on it, and I think that the sock itself is a really, really good pattern choice because the fit is perfect. They have 3 sizes for the sock, and it's based on the circumference of your foot. And I wear an 8.5 size shoe, and I did the circumference of my foot, so I figured it out and did the size 2, and it fit my foot perfectly. I've never had a knitted object fit this well. This is a blocked sock, and you can see the cute little ghosts on it and the heel construction. And what I wanted to do is, for Summerween, I wanted to keep an element of summer into these crafts. So I chose this very, very vibrant background color. So this is the main color, and I haven't bought this before, and then I can't really find the tag for it, but I'll list it down below. And it's a fingering weight sock yarn, and it's incredibly soft. I've made a few pairs of socks before, but I haven't had any socks that I feel like I could actually wear and would be comfortable and I could walk around all day in them. These ones I can. I've done it and very, very comfy. For the other yarns, I used these scraps that I had from Blue Sky Fibers. Woo, woo. Yeah, so these if you watched my first video, I made a triangle scarf bandana piece design. That's my own design, and I used Blue Sky Fibers fingering weight yarn for those. So these were some scraps from that. And I unraveled part of a design that I had been making and used the scraps for that because this design didn't work out. But those are comfortable, but these are comfortable as well. And I like the stripe at the top. I like the cute little ghosts. It's just an adorable pattern and it looks really good on. There's also two patterns that you get with this set, the spooky sock set. One is the ghosts and then ghost color work throughout, and then the second one is witches that are on the top part of the leg band, and then the bottom is solid color work. But you could modify that if you like the witches and probably figure out how to do the witches all the way down if you're really crafty. I'm not personally drawn to those witch socks, but I really, really did love the spooky socks. And then this one was not blocked. So I wanted to show you blocked and not blocked. And you can see how wonky the not blocked sock is. But when I blocked this sock, I wanted to do one first to see what would happen. And the top, it does look a little wide. It's wider than the picture looks of the pattern if you look on Ravelry, but it does still fit my foot really well and stay snug around my leg. And the length, I think, is a perfect length. I don't like knitted socks that are too high or too low. I love the shape of this pattern. Whoever came up with this construction did a really good job making it very attractive. And I've been looking at these heels before because the only other heel that I've seen of the two other socks I made kind of goes up the back and then it has a gusset. So there's kind of three parts to knitting the heel, but this one just had two parts to knitting the heel. It was just a matter of connecting the two. And you just have to really pay attention to what you're doing when you get to the heel part. I did have to start over a couple of times because I got distracted, but that's just me. Anyway, this is a great pattern, I think, and I definitely will make more of that designer's socks in the future. I kept this one unblocked because I can always block it if I want to, but I also want to see if this one gets too wide for me and I can't get it to conform to my foot, then I'll just make another sock that's unblocked like this one and I won't have to worry about that issue. So that is the Spooky Sock set by Stone Knits, and I will link the yarns I used below. Okay, so, and also the name of this particular sock pattern is I Am Afraid of No Ghost Socks. Okay, so the second project that I made, I knew I didn't have too much time to make a lot of Summerween projects, so I decided to do some accessories, the socks being one, and then I had never made a knit scrunchie before, so I was really curious about how those are put together. So I was looking at different patterns of scrunchies, and then one stuck out to me, and that was the Bisous scrunchie by Camille K. And what looked really neat about this pattern is the outside of the scrunchie had a little closed braid knitted around it, which I later found out was created by doing a 3-needle bind off. I wanted to make the big size scrunchie. I think there's two sizes, a small and a large size. And the fun thing about this pattern is that you can make it different sizes if you want. Like, you're not going to mess up a scrunchie too much. I picked colors that were kind of fall colors, I guess, and I forgot the idea that I had before that I wanted to make things like a summer spooky color spooky summer colors, so I forgot that with this and the second scrunchie, but that's okay. I'm still happy with how they turned out and I can wear them in the fall. But this was the one that I made the large size. And it's a mohair scrunchie, which I think gives it a nice texture. Like, I did my own pattern on the inside, so if you kind of have to stretch it out to see that a little bit better. But yeah, my own little pattern of like a camel color and red mohair. It has a really soft texture and I think it would look good with any outfit. So I used Sandisgarn Tin Silk mohair for this that I had. And I used this other yarn by Blue Sky Fibers that I have been loving, and it's their Prairie line. You can't really see the texture too much from this ball, but I got 5 other skeins of this yarn and you can see the texture a little bit better. Okay. So I like the fuzziness of this yarn and the texture of it is really fun to play with. And I like using it a little bit more than the Sandisgarn mohair because this is a little bit thicker. So you have the option to do this by itself a little bit more than you would with the typical mohair where a lot of people pair that with a thicker yarn for a little bit more structure, but you don't really have to do that as much with this yarn. So what I did with the scrunchie is I did it just one strand of this reddish color, and then I held double the Sandisgarn to make them the same width. The 3-needle bind off is right here. It goes all the way around. I made this one a little bit bigger than even the pattern instructed because I wanted to get this nice color work in. So it's a little bit bigger, and so the 3-needle bind off edge, like these edges kind of go over it a little bit. So you can avoid that by making the scrunchie not as long, and it's a really easy pattern to follow. It's very adaptable. So I made a second one for my daughter, and this also I kind of did in Halloween colors. You can just see how different this is than this one, but this is the same pattern that inspired both of them. I just used one of her hair ties, which is a little bit smaller in the center, one of mine for the other one. But I wanted one that, even with this one, I do have to wrap it around twice because I have quite thin hair. But this one, I think she could just put it in once and her hair would stay. So I like that look because then you can see like the full artwork. And so I used a pattern that I was inspired by for the color work, and that is something I just saw on Pinterest. And it's a color work that I've seen multiple times. It's these kind of intersecting vertical bars. And I don't know that it has a specific name. I was trying to look that up. So if anybody knows and wants to comment that might be helpful. It looks like a very traditional type of colorwork pattern for vertical stripes. And that worked very well with this. And then I ended up just folding it over and it created these two fun sides. So I think I'm going to use this scrunchie pattern a lot. I'm going to make many more scrunchies out of it, and that's actually my idea for the third project that I want to make. I got some more of that prairie yarn because for this project I used just acrylic yarn that I had in stash, just basic kind of acrylic worsted weight yarn. I thought that that worked really well for a kid's scrunchie, but I kept thinking when I was making this how much I actually did like working with the prairie yarn. I like the look of the mohair for a scrunchie because I think it just looks maybe a little bit more elegant or something like that. So I got quite a few of these prairie yarns by Blue Sky Fibers. And so this is them right here. And the idea for this is another scrunchie, and it was based off of this one because I noticed that when I was doing these white parts of the stripes, that I could go further with the spooky theme, and I could make these white parts like ghosts that were coming out of the center of the scrunchie. And that combined with more of a summer palette, I think would make a really fantastic scrunchie and more Summerween themed than the other two scrunchies. So I wanted to use the prairie yarns, and these are all the colors that are going to go into that scrunchie. So I'm excited to debut it by showing you the yarns, and then you get to see what comes out of that brainchild of mine for the pattern. So I have the colors right here, and I believe, okay, I looked up the colors because some of them that I thought would be one were actually another. So this white is called Yarrow. This black is Raven, very squishy and very fuzzy. Orange is Monarch, this light orange, sherbet almost color orange is Monarch. This sort of pea green, light pea green, pea soup color green is called Katydid. And this purple is elderberry. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to do something similar to this, but a little bit bigger, like this one, sort of in the middle size of these. And then I'm going to have ghosts coming out around it, a little bit fewer than these white markings here, but the ghosts will be going around it. And then in between the ghosts, I'm gonna try to do a flower with the purple, orange, and green, so that it has more of a summer feel with ghost flower. And I think that will be really pretty. And I'm excited to modify that pattern to make something from my own brain. So that's what I plan to do, and I will come back and show you when that is done. The only other thing that I have knitting to show you is a whip that I've been working on, and it's more of like a fall Halloween type knit than a Summerween, but I thought it sort of fit the mold a little bit, so I wanted to share it with you. And this is called the Nordstrand sweater. by Han Rimmon, and it's a free pattern on the Filcolana yarn site. And a couple of things that were different about this pattern was that it has the longer neck. I haven't made one that long before, but if you look at the picture of the pattern, it folds over nicely and stretches, the neck stretches into the rest of the sweater. So it's a fun construction. And then it's just a really simple top-down pattern that you do the color work, and then after the color work you split for sleeves and just do the main color after that for the rest of the sweater. So last night I finished the color work on this. What the pattern describes it as a characteristic Nordic yoke. It looks sort of like a flower motif. I used a blue sky fiber for this yarn too, and it's called Rusted Roof, and it's their Woolstok line of worsted weight. So the pattern actually wants you to do, or calls for, a worsted weight yarn paired with a mohair for a bulky look, or bulky weight yarn. And for monetary purposes, I just chose to use the worsted weight yarn, and then I made the medium size, so I'm hoping that it fits well. It would have been a lot more yarn than I really wanted to buy. I don't necessarily get too much more out of adding mohair to a sweater. I think it's sometimes nice to have that halo effect, but I don't think it's completely necessary. And mohair does kind of itch my skin a little bit, so I decided to just go with this worsted weight. And I think that this yarn is very squishy. It's Peruvian Highland wool, and it's a little bit thicker looking than a typical worsted weight with the braided texture. So I'm hoping that I got the fit right. I know you can adjust certain things, so that's what I'm trying to do. And then I just got this in the white color to contrast. I have been trying to get more colorful. I'm not sure how much you can see it, but it is like a rusted orange or a burnt orange color, but it's a really bright burnt orange color. So I think it makes more of a statement piece, and I'm excited to wear it and have that color in my wardrobe. I think that I want to move more and more towards colorful pieces and express myself that way. So I think that that brings a little bit of joy to my life, and this is the latest in that effort. So it's a beautiful pattern. I'm not familiar with the designer. I haven't made anything by them before, but the pattern is done in a really easy way that you can understand, and it's not a difficult pattern. So I would recommend it if you want to make a color work, kind of like a simple color work pattern for your first color work sweater. This would be a really good choice. I had done stranded color work before, but I didn't know that you can actually make the contrasting color pop if you want by putting, if you're using the two yarns to knit, if you cross over the one that goes underneath, the one that goes behind the other yarn is always going to be the one that pops up a little bit more. So that's what I did with these socks, and I think that's why I was able to achieve, that striking contrast. And I had actually started this sweater before I started the socks, and I didn't have a pattern that I was going by, or I didn't have an established, like, which yarn is in front that I was going by when I started this. But then by the time I got to this point, I started intentionally putting the white yarn behind the orange yarn. So I don't know, you tell me, I guess, if you can see a difference. I can't really see it too much right now, but when I'm looking at it in person, I can see the color pop a little bit more toward the bottom. There's also the very first of the contrasting color is right here, and it's a little dot that's above every line of pattern, and those kind of got buried. So I'm thinking what I did with those is I didn't put the white yarn behind. So I'm going to do that from now on. I just didn't want to start the sweater all the way over again because that would be really annoying. But that is the Nord strand. Really beautiful pattern, and excited to finish it. I'll have it definitely finished before fall. So I had to get a drink because I'm talking so much. Here's the part where I got tired of sitting still, and so I decided to keep going with the Summerween theme and bake something. It was still July and the blueberries were in season. I wanted to have this video done earlier, but I wasn't happy enough with it. I know Summerween is usually around mid to late July, but I'm still getting the hang of this, so I appreciate your patience, and I hope you'll get something out of the video. I figure it's an unofficial holiday anyway, and it's a good reminder that we can just celebrate being creative in life whenever we want to. I wanted to combine something fresh and summery with something filling and maybe spiced, so this blueberry pumpkin bread was the perfect choice. It wasn't hard to make. It did get a little hot in my kitchen though. My partner likes to tell me that I always bake on the hottest day of the year, but to be fair, there have been a lot of hot days lately, and once I get the idea to bake something, I really don't like to wait. Baking has always been a source of happiness for me. My family likes to make a lot of the same recipes and decorate my grandma's sugar cookie recipe every year for Halloween and Christmas. I've realized more and more how important it is to remember to do the things that make you happy, because as silly as it sounds, it's easy to forget to make time for happiness. I've been constantly relearning who I am, and this is an important touchstone for me whenever I feel a little lost. I'd love to hear from you what some of the things are that you do to stay happy. I find that it's usually something small, which ends up being a big part of who you are in the long run. I'm also guilty of overthinking things and maybe getting a little too philosophical or existential. That's why I find that baking and knitting and reading can really pull me out of my own head sometimes, and I'm really grateful that I've taken the time to really nurture these hobbies. So overall, I liked the recipe. I thought it turned out pretty good. It was a tad on the sweet side, so if you don't like that as much, you could always maybe add a little bit less sugar. And don't forget to taste the batter, that's a very important part. Later, I put some blueberries on top, and maybe that added a little bit more to the sweetness. And then there's a glaze that goes on top of it as well. So you can really back off on the sweetness of this recipe if that's more of what you're into. Good evening. I'm here to talk to you about books, specifically The Ghost Story. I've always loved a good ghost story, and I decided that I really needed to up my book collection to have more ghost stories in them because it was sorely lacking. 2 books featuring ghosts in them before I got my most recent books, and this is The Haunting of Hill House in the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. Really beautiful cover there. And then this, I don't know even where I got this, but it is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So those are the only 2 books of ghosts that I previously owned, and I really wanted to make up for that. I talked about this in my first video, but I got these 2 books of ghost stories from thrift books a couple weeks ago, and I read a few stories from each, so I wanted to talk to you about those. Just a note on these 2 stories that I'm going to be talking about. I am going to do spoilers for them, and they are spooky stories, so there are some triggers that are in these, and mostly the triggers are self-harm and mental health triggers, so just take that with caution when you listen to these, please. The first collection I'm going to talk to you about is Roald Dahl's Book of Ghost Stories. When I picked this up, I originally thought that it was all ghost stories written by Roald Dahl. So at first I was a little disappointed because it's actually an anthology of ghost stories. But as I read, I did enjoy some of the stories a little bit more than I thought I would. In the introduction, Roald Dahl talks a little bit about what made him come up with the idea for this book. And it all stems from a TV show that was planned to be created in 1958. And Roald Dahl was tasked with finding 24 ghost stories for this show. Through his research, Roald Dahl read, I think, about 750 different ghost stories, and he picked the best of the best for this collection as far as his taste goes. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And also what Roald Dahl noted in the introduction was that, one, it's very hard to write a good ghost story, and that there's a lot of bad ghost stories out there. And secondly, that most of the good ghost stories, or a lot of the good ghost stories that he found were written by women, and that was a little interesting to him. I'm not sure what that says exactly, but he did note that, and also kind of compared it to children's books, and that a lot more women are prolific children's authors of very well written children's books than men, and that it's also very difficult, he noted, to write a children's book. So he made that connection, and it's food for thought. I read 3 stories from this collection, and they are just the first 3 stories. There's 15. I read W.S. by L.P. Hartley, Harry by Rosemary Timperley, and The Corner Shop by Cynthia Asquith. So the first story, W.S., is about an author named Walter Streeter, and he starts getting these letters from a fan of his work. The letters are a little bit, I would say, weird at first, and then they become more and more unsettling. There are postcards, and they're comprised of the location the postcard is being written from. There's a little description of that, and then the writer of the postcard kind of negs the author, saying things about his work and kind of making it seem like he knows a little bit more about the author than he should be familiar with. He'll just write something like, he's in a place called Berwick-on-Tweed, and he's like, "What do you think of Berwick-on-Tweed? Like you, it's on the border. I hope this doesn't sound rude." And then the next letter says, "I know you're interested in cathedrals. I'm sure this isn't a sign of megalomania on your case." So he's passive aggressive, whoever this writer of these postcards are. So, it's kind of putting Walter Streeter on notice. And then as he keeps getting these postcards, he notices that the initials of the writer of the postcards is W.S., which are the same as his own. So he finds that also a little bit odd, but isn't too worried about it because also there's many people who have those initials, William Shakespeare being one. He's not too worried. As it goes on, it looks like the letters are coming closer and closer to him in location, and the pictures on the postcard point to this. So he starts to get a little bit concerned. He sees that the handwriting is a little bit similar to his own. The letters are getting a little bit more aggressive and saying things like that he's going to want to meet the author soon. Walter Streeter talks to the police, and they tell him, "Oh, I'm sure it's just a lunatic woman and a stalker." So they agree to stop by his house on the date that the postcard says that that person is going to be meeting Walter Streeter. Walter Streeter is a a little bit nervous. He's trying to think, who could this be that's writing to me? Who could this be from my past? He's searching and can't really think of who it could possibly be. And he actually thinks in his head about some of the characters that he's written in the past, and one of the characters is the most evil character that he could have drawn up. He did this in his youth and says that since then he doesn't write anyone totally good or totally bad, but this one character stands out as being 100% evil. So he's reminded of that, and he decides to look out the window, and he sees a policeman out the window, so he feels that he's very safe. He invites the policeman in to talk with him, and when the policeman is in his house, he gets a call from the police station that says, "We're sorry, we didn't send anybody to look at your house. We forgot." So who's in Walter Streeter's kitchen? This ends up being the character that Walter had written in the past. So he's coming to grips with this real life manifestation of the evil that he had created. It's a pretty good story. It's not super terrifying, but I would say that it is a little bit chilling when you deal with the police part and find out that that wasn't the police. And that was the creepiest part of that story for sure. The second story is called Harry, and that is by Rosemary Timperley. I have not heard of her or any of these authors from any of these stories, except for they do have a Sheridan Le Fanu story and they have a Edith Wharton story. So those are the only two that I know of the 15. But the second story is called Harry, and that has a very kind of spooky beginning. The first line I liked a lot, and it was, "Such ordinary things make me afraid. Sunshine, sharp shadows on grass, white roses, children with red hair, and the name Harry. Such an ordinary name." And this is about a woman with a daughter named Christine, and this is an adopted daughter that she has. Her daughter starts talking to an imaginary friend. The imaginary friend's name is Harry. The girl won't let this go. She wants him to go everywhere they go. She talks about things that he says to her, and it really starts concerning the mother. She says details about Harry that just make it all the more unsettling. She's very detailed about this for a kid with an imaginary friend. He is 14. He's tall for his age. She talks to a counselor who tells her that she should just play along with it and let Christine have this imaginary friend, that is very common for kids to have imaginary friends and to get very creative about them. The mother tries to do that. I don't think she's very successful at it, and she loses her cool when Christine says, "I want to live with Harry. Harry wants to take me with him." So she kind of shakes her daughter and she's like, "Stop talking about Harry. He's not real. He's imaginary." And the girl gets obviously very upset. The mother decides that she's going to go to find out a little bit more about the birth family of her daughter, because she never wanted to know about her birth daughter's family. She wanted it to be like a cut and dry adoption, that this is her daughter and there was nothing that happened before. She decides to go to check out the birth mother's family. She finds out a little bit more about the girl's birth family when she goes to the caseworker, and she pretty much begs the caseworker to give her some more details about Christine's past. And through that, she finds out that Christine had a mother and a father, and an older brother whose name was Harry. And he was 14 years old, and the mother and father, they were abusive, they were neglectful, and Harry tried to protect Christine as much as he was able, but she was just a little baby at this point, so she has now no memory of Harry being her brother. One day, the people that live in the building saw something fly out the window, and it is Harry jumping out the window with his little sister. When they fell, he broke his neck and died. They jumped out the window because the mother and father turned on the gas in the apartment and were trying to kill the whole family. So the mother finds out that that's who Harry is, and she's understandably really frightened, because she had also, when she went to their house, seen like shadows, and the character of Harry is starting to appear to her a little bit more. So she's very, very afraid. She goes to school to pick up her daughter, and the school tells her, "Somebody already picked up Christine. Her brother picked her up." And he's so sweet, and how caring and sweet for a brother to care for his little sister like that. The mom is freaking out. She runs home. She goes to the area where she has seen her daughter playing with her imaginary friend. She calls her name, she yells, and she never sees her daughter again. Pretty good story, a little creepy. Where did Christine go? We have no idea. I think it was a little darker in tone than the first one, just because maybe it involves a child. But I think with Harry, you could kind of see where this was going, but it was still entertaining to read. The next book that I picked up and read a few short stories from was The Best Ghost Stories of J. Sheridan Le Fanu, who is the author of Carmilla, which was the inspiration for Dracula. These fall into the category of Victorian ghost stories. He is one of the best known authors of this genre, and he influenced other ghost story writers in the future like M.R. James and Bram Stoker. His ghost stories are very psychological. They have a heavy atmosphere to them, and a lot of ghost stories that he writes are in the category of a revenge ghost story. I also noticed when reading this that the ghost stories are often used as an allegory of the time that Le Fanu lived, and especially the first story that I read, which is called Squire Toby's Will. And this story was a little unsettling. It wasn't the scariest ghost story that I've read, and I was a little confused by it because I think that there's a greater context for this first story, and I didn't really understand that until I read the context. So this story is about a father and his two sons, and the father is Squire Toby. He has quite a big inheritance and a large house, and when he dies, he leaves all of his money to the youngest, more handsome brother, whose name is Handsome Charlie, and he doesn't leave any to his other older son, whose name is Scroop. So we have Handsome Charlie and we have Scroop, and after Squire Toby dies, they battle it out in court. And Handsome Charlie, the will is in his favor, so he takes all of the money, and there's bad blood between the two brothers. Eventually, strange things start happening around the house, and Charlie finds a bulldog who has a strange likeness to his father, and it follows him around and guards him and acts strangely, tries to lay on him in the middle of the night and stares at him, and it's just a very unsettling dog to the whole staff that works at the house. And also, people start hearing noises. They start seeing things. Things start to be very uncomfortable in the house for the staff, and there's a lot of talk that there are supernatural things happening. The brother is led one night to an old cupboard that shows the original will that should have been the one that was enforced. It actually gives the money to Scroop, the older brother. But Charlie decides to hide this, and he keeps it all to himself. Things get worse and worse. You start to have more disturbances, especially when Charlie goes to bed. He's continuously haunted by the presence of some supernatural being. He's very terrified, and his health starts to degrade, and he doesn't know exactly what to do. But he tells himself, I'm going to give this inheritance to my brother after I die, and that maybe will help make things better between the two. But as many times as he tells himself that he's going to make this right by his brother, he just doesn't do it. And it all culminates at the end with Charlie hanging himself, and later some of the staff seeing him and two men all walking toward the family mausoleum. The story was pretty good, but I think once you read the context of it, that really helps you appreciate it a lot more, because what I had found out is that this story is kind of an allegory of the Catholic and Protestant division in Ireland. Squire Toby represents Father England, Handsome Charlie represents the Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and Scrope represents the Irish Catholic. So there's the whole allegory of the land belonging to the Irish Catholics and kind of being usurped or taken by England. The whole story being about revenge sort of encapsulates that you don't get away with something for too long and that the actions that you do come back to haunt you. So I thought that was pretty interesting, reading a little bit more about it, and I recommend maybe knowing a little bit more about what's going on during the time that Le Fanu lived, because he does incorporate that a lot into his stories. The second story I read by him is called Green Tea, and I chose that story because they highlighted it on this collection as being one of his most popular stories. And I found out that this is his second most popular behind Carmilla, and that the character in it that is the narrator, his name is Dr. Martin Hesselius, that he is the prototype for Van Helsing, who was another Bram Stoker creation in Dracula. So I thought that was really interesting, and he is like an occult detective who is trying to figure out what's wrong with an acquaintance of his. He travels a lot, and he comes across this clergyman named Jennings, and he starts to discover that this clergyman is acting a little out of it, just a little bit disturbed, and he is trying to make his acquaintance a little bit more to figure out what might be going on. So Jennings confesses to Dr. Hesselius that he likes to study metaphysics a lot, and they actually have that in common. And through his studies, he likes to imbibe in green tea to help him stay awake and he just always drinks green tea when he studies. So he's drinking lots and lots of green tea, and this tea is affecting him in some way as he's studying the metaphysics, and he starts to see things, and what he sees is a monkey. And this monkey is something that nobody else can see, and it's kind of wild and taunting him and does blasphemous things, and it's really freaking out this clergyman because he can't get rid of it. It's always around him, it's always where he can see it, and it watches him sleep. So it's very frightening to him, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's kind of beside himself. So that's why he confesses this to Dr. Hesselius. The doctor takes him at his word, and he tries to figure out how he can help him. The next time he talks to Jennings is even more distraught. He says that the creature has started speaking to him, and it is saying blasphemous things, and it is trying to get him to do things that are bad. He's trying to get him one day to, when he's walking with his niece and there's a well, he's trying to get him to throw himself down it. And the man is almost kind of in hysterics about what's going on. So Dr. Hesselius goes home and sleeps, and in the night gets a note from Jennings' servant. Dr. Hesselius doesn't get the note until the morning, and he rushes over to find that Jennings had actually died. He had actually killed himself in the night. That's basically the end of the story, but Dr. Hesselius then goes on to mention that he has solved 58 more cases of this exact thing happening with other people. And some context I got outside of the story was that green tea was something that people had been drinking that wasn't a regulated product at the time. So it was a little more dangerous to drink green tea because it had a lot of chemical additives in it that people were adding to cheapen the production of the product. And that's why they chose that particular drink to be the thing that gave those visions to Jennings. And why it was a monkey is basically because it represented Jennings' primal self. Why it was a blasphemous monkey, I'm not sure if that's maybe a sign of that we're sinful or something like that at the time, but I think that's kind of where it was pointing to. I thought that this story was pretty disturbing because it kind of reminded me a lot of struggles that people have and how as much as people want to get out of a way that they're feeling, they might not be able to do that, and how terrifying that is. And I think that was the real terror behind this story. It was a lot more scary than any of the other stories that I had read so far, and I think that one will definitely stick with me. I can see that it's a classic for a reason. Those are the 2 stories that I've read of this book so far, and I'm excited to read more. So thank you for watching. I really enjoyed sharing these spooky stories with you, and I'm really looking forward to building my collection even more of ghost stories. So I hope that you enjoyed all of the Summerween content. I'm very glad that I could make a few projects and read a few things and find a way to celebrate this unofficial holiday. I'll be coming to you soon with a few updates on knitting and reading in a few weeks. And in the meantime, I hope you're enjoying your summer. Squeeze really hard. Spooky. You think Daddy will like it?
Okay, all done. Daddy, here you go.